You've done the work. You've produced real results. You've stayed late, showed up early, and hit the targets that your boss gave you. And then the promotion, the stretch assignment, the visibility all went to someone else. It went to someone who, if you're being honest, spent a lot of time having conversations with the right people. Today, I'm going to tell you what they were actually doing, why it's not what you think it was, and how to do it yourself without compromising who you are. Welcome to Toby Talks. I'm Toby Hoy, and if today is the first time that you found the show, I'm glad you're here. And if you've been listening for a while, you already know that we don't do vague inspiration here. We do skills, practical, applicable skills that make you better at the actual work of leading, growing, and building a career worth having. Today, we're talking about one of the most misunderstood skills in the professional world, and that is managing up. I do want to be clear right out of the gate. This isn't an episode about sucking up. This is not an episode about navigating office politics. It's about learning to say the right things to get ahead. It's about understanding something that most professionals figure out way too late, if they figure it out at all. Your relationship with your boss is a skill, and that skill can be developed. Here's what we're covering today. First, the story that completely changed how I see this topic, and then we'll migrate into what managing up actually means and what it absolutely doesn't mean. After that, we'll dig into why most skilled professionals actively avoid this, even though they know that it matters. And then we'll cover 5 concrete behaviors that you can apply this week. Finally, how to handle the hardest part, disagreeing with your boss without damaging the relationship. That's the roadmap for today, so buckle in. I want to start off with a story because I think it captures the problem far better than any definition that I could give you. Picture 2 employees at the same company, in the same department, under the same manager. Both are smart, both are hardworking, and both are getting solid performance reviews year after year. 3 years in, one of them gets promoted into a leadership role. The other one, who by most objective measures has produced slightly more output than the other one, doesn't. The person who didn't get promoted is genuinely confused. They've done everything right. They've hit their numbers. They've been a good teammate. They've never caused drama or missed a deadline. So what happened? I've watched this exact scenario play out in organizations more times than I can count. In tech companies, in healthcare systems, in small businesses with 5 people, and in global corporations with 50,000. It almost always comes down to the same thing. It's not performance, it's not talent, and it's not luck. The person who got promoted had built a relationship with their manager that went beyond just task execution. They had made themselves visible, relevant, and valuable in a way that extended past their job description. They had given their manager a reason to advocate for them, not just to evaluate them. The person who didn't get promoted had treated their job as a transaction. Here's the work you asked for, please evaluate it. Nothing more. They made the common mistake of believing that results speak for themselves. And here's the thing, sometimes they do. You put up undeniable numbers, you deliver an undeniable outcome, and the results do carry you forward. But that is the exception to the rule. In most organizations, most of the time, the people who advance are those who have learned to make their work matter in the eyes of those who decide what happens next. That gap between being good at your job and being seen as someone with potential and capacity, that gap is exactly what managing up closes. And most people never close it, not because they can't, but because they either don't know how or have convinced themselves that doing so makes them something that they don't want to be. So let's talk about that. I want to define this clearly because the term is constantly misused and misunderstood. Managing up is not flattery. It's not telling your boss that they're great. It's not aligning yourself with power for personal gain. Managing up is building an intentional, mutually beneficial relationship with the person above you on the org chart. It means understanding what they need, how they think, and what success looks like from their vantage point, and then showing up in a way that is genuinely useful to them. Notice that word, genuinely. That's the word that separates managing up from its uglier cousin, sucking up. When you suck up, you're performing. You're saying things that you don't mean. You're agreeing with ideas that you disagree with because agreement feels safer than honesty. You're prioritizing being liked over being useful. When you manage up, you're partnering. You're bringing your actual capabilities and honest perspective to a relationship where the other person has more organizational authority than you do. Here's the test that I give to people when they're unsure which side of the line they're on. Ask yourself, if my boss got replaced tomorrow, would I behave the same way toward their successor? If the answer is yes, then you're managing up. If the answer is no, you've been sucking up. Because genuine managing up isn't about the individual. It's about the practice. It's about being someone that any leader would want on their team, regardless of who that leader happens to be. That distinction matters because it reframes the entire thing. This isn't about currying favor with a specific person. It's about developing a skill that serves you across every relationship, every role, and at every stage of your career. You probably already know that your relationship with your boss matters. You've probably seen firsthand that some people navigate those relationships better than others, and yet you may have never done anything intentional about it. Why not? I think there are 4 main reasons, and I want to spend some time on each of them because understanding the resistance is honestly half the battle. The first one is the suck-up fear. Nobody wants to be the person playing politics. Nobody wants their colleagues rolling their eyes when they walk out of the boss's office. The social cost of being perceived as someone who's angling for favor feels real and significant. And here's the thing, that fear is not irrational. Those people exist. The transparent flatterers, the ones who agree with everything and say nothing real. They're annoying and they do get judged. But notice what this fear assumes. It assumes that anything you do intentionally to build a relationship with leadership must be performative. And that assumption is just wrong. You can be genuine and intentional at the same time. In fact, you have to be both, or the intentionality collapses into manipulation. Next is the overstepping fear. There's a cultural norm in most organizations that says your job is to do your job, and your boss's job is to lead you doing your job. Anything that crosses that line feels presumptuous, offering perspective when you haven't been asked for it, asking about strategy when that's above your pay grade, or proactively flagging things that your boss may not have thought about. But think about what that norm actually produces. It produces people who want to be told what to do, who never offer perspective unless invited, and who are then surprised when they're not considered for leadership roles. Leaders initiate. They don't wait. If you want to be seen as someone with leadership potential, you have to start demonstrating it before anyone gives you the title. Third is the fear of rejection. Sharing your thinking with someone who has authority over you is genuinely vulnerable. They might think your idea is bad. They might think you're overstepping. That risk is uncomfortable and it's real. I'm not going to tell you it doesn't exist because it does, but I will tell you this. The risk of never sharing your thinking is significantly higher. You cannot be recognized for capabilities that no one knows you have. The person credited with good thinking isn't always the one who thought it first. It's the person who said it out loud. And finally, the ambition aversion. A lot of people, especially early in their careers, have been conditioned to believe that visible ambition is unseemly. that wanting to advance should be quiet, almost apologetic. Talking openly about where you want to go is somehow arrogant. And all of that is a recipe for stagnation. The people who grow fastest in organizations are the ones who are clear about where they want to go, and they work intentionally toward that goal. Not aggressively, not selfishly, but intentionally. There's nothing wrong with wanting to grow. There's something very wrong with wanting to grow and doing nothing to make it happen. Let me give you a concrete example of what managing up looks like in practice. And I'm going to use a setting that most people don't expect. Toby's taco truck, the finest tacos on wheels, and occasionally the stage for business lessons that I didn't plan to learn. Imagine two part-time prep cooks, both hired at the same time, Marcus and Jade. Both are capable, both are reliable, and they're both doing exactly what is asked of them without complaint. About 6 weeks in, Marcus starts doing something a little different. He notices that the Friday lunch rush is consistently chaotic, and the chaos traces back to extra prep work that was left unfinished during the morning window on higher volume Fridays. The owner, Toby, is running the truck and handling customers and doesn't have visibility into the broken prep schedule. Marcus doesn't complain about it. He doesn't write a memo. He shows up 30 minutes early on the next 2 Fridays, gets the prep done completely and properly, and then goes to the owner and says, I noticed we were losing the front end of the lunch rush on Fridays because of the prep crunch. I adjusted my schedule to fix it, and sales were up about 15% on both of those Fridays. I just wanted to flag it. Now, that's a simplified example, but it's a complete managing up package in a taco truck context. Marcus identified a problem that was costing the owner money and stress, and he solved it without being asked for or applauded for the effort. He communicated the result in terms that the owner actually cared about, revenue, and he did it with no fanfare whatsoever. Now, Jade, meanwhile, is doing excellent work, reliable, clean, consistent. She's producing good results and just waiting for those results to be noticed and then subsequently rewarded. It's not that Jade is doing anything wrong. The gap is that Marcus made himself relevant to the owner's actual concerns. He connected his work to what mattered, and Jade did her job and then just assumed that would be enough. In a world with unlimited resources and perfect management, maybe it would be. But most workplaces don't have unlimited resources or perfect management. In those environments, the people who get trusted with more are the ones who demonstrate that they can think beyond their own lane. The lesson here isn't do more. It's pay attention to what matters and connect your work to that. So let's break this down into 5 specific behaviors. These aren't theories. These are things that you can start doing this week. Number 1, know what keeps your boss up at night. Your boss, your manager, has a set of things that they care about most. And those things usually don't change from week to week. They're the big rocks, the goals that they're accountable for, the risks that they're watching, the pressures coming from above them. Pay attention in meetings. Listen for the questions that surface repeatedly. Look for the topics that get the most airtime. And talk to colleagues who have been in the organization longer than you have. Most of the time, the real priorities are not secret. They're just not being paid attention to by the people who should be. When you know what matters to your boss, you can frame your work in those terms. Not dishonesty, not as a performance, but as relevant communication. Instead of, I finished the report, try this instead. I finished the report, and the customer retention data surprised me. I think it connects directly to the 3rd quarter target that you mentioned last week. Can we find 15 minutes in the next couple days to review and discuss? That was the same work, but completely different visibility, completely different conversation. Number 2 is to communicate in their style, not yours. Every leader has a preference for how they want information delivered. Some want detailed updates. Others want the headline and then the ask. Some prefer email. Others prefer a quick conversation. Some may want to be involved early in your thinking process, and others want you to come to them with a finished recommendation. Figure out which type your boss is and then adapt. This isn't about being a chameleon. It's about professional communication competence. If you write long, detailed emails to a boss who scans and moves on, your best thinking is getting lost. If you give your boss a quick summary who wants depth, you look like you haven't done the work. If you're not sure which they prefer, ask them, how do you prefer I keep you updated on the project? It's a 10-second question that can save you weeks of miscommunication and misaligned expectations. Number 3 is to bring solutions, not just problems. Every time you walk into your boss's office with a problem and no proposed solution, you're placing a cognitive burden on them. You're saying, in effect, I've identified something that needs solving. That job is now yours. Even when that is appropriate, even when the problem genuinely does require their authority or their perspective to solve, you can still arrive with some of the thinking already done. Here's the problem I'm seeing, and here are 2 possible approaches. My instinct is option B, and here's why. And I wanted to run it by you before I move forward. That's it. You haven't overstepped. You haven't pretended to have more authority than you do. You've demonstrated that you're someone who brings their brain to work with them along with their lunch. Over time, this reputation builds. You become someone who handles things, and people who handle things get trusted with more things. That isn't a coincidence. Number 4 is to make your work visible without bragging. This one gets under the skin of a lot of hardworking people because it feels a little uncomfortable. I don't want to be the person who talks about themselves all the time. Generally speaking, that's a good instinct, but there is a gap between bragging and communicating. And most people are so worried about the first that they completely abandon the second. Your boss is managing multiple people across multiple projects, each with competing demands. They're not tracking every accomplishment of every person in detail. Assuming your results are being noticed and accurately tracked is a risky bet, and most of the time, you'll lose it. Making your work visible isn't about impressing your boss. It's about giving them the information that they need to evaluate and advocate for you accurately. A simple, consistent practice of brief updates completely changes this. A short weekly email, a 2-minute mention at the end of a meeting, a quick note on what moved forward last week. Frame it as you keeping them informed, not reporting your accomplishments, and the whole energy of the thing changes. Here's where things stand on the 3 items from our last conversation. Sounds a lot like a partner. Look what I did sounds a lot like a report card. One of those builds a relationship, and the other one builds an audience. And number 5, ask for feedback and actually use it. Most feedback requests are subtle validation seeking. Did I do okay? Is really, please tell me I did okay. Your boss knows this. Almost everyone who's been in a leadership role for more than a year has learned to recognize it. What actually gets their attention is when someone asks in a way that makes it clear that they actually want to improve, not just feel good. Changing that to, what's one thing I could have handled differently on that project to make your job easier? Or, if you were coaching someone in my position to grow into a leadership role faster, what would you tell me to improve on? Those questions are harder to dodge. They invite real input, and here's the thing that most people don't think about. The feedback itself is almost secondary. What matters is what you do with it. When you follow through, when you demonstrate in the next conversation or the next project that you actually processed and used the feedback that you received, you build something that very few people ever achieve with their managers. And that is genuine trust that you're worth investing in. You stop being someone to manage and you start being someone to develop. That shift changes everything about how an organization thinks about you. We need to spend a few minutes on the next concept because it's where managing up breaks down for the vast majority of people. Managing up does not mean agreeing with everything. It does not mean keeping your honest perspective to yourself when the stakes are high. If you're operating purely as a yes person, you are actually not valuable. You are a decoration. And experienced leaders know the difference. The skill is how you disagree. There's a version of disagreement that sounds like resistance. I don't think that's going to work. Now that might be accurate, but delivered in that way, it puts your boss on the defensive and often shuts down the conversation before it even starts. There's another version of that sounds like collaboration. I want to make sure I'm seeing this the same way you are. Here's where I'm hesitant, and I'm curious if there's context that I'm missing that changes my read. That second version opens a conversation. It positions you as someone who thinks, not as someone who opposes. The first one sounds like an obstacle. The second sounds like a thought partner. Your boss doesn't need fewer obstacles. They need more thought partners. And when you're overruled, when you've raised your concern and the decision goes in a different direction anyway, here's what you do. Commit to the direction while still flagging your concern clearly for the record. Something like, I hear you and I'll drive this forward in the way that you've decided. I do want to note that I'm still not sure about X, Y, or Z. So if it comes to an issue down the road, we've already had this conversation. That isn't insubordination. That's exactly what a leader does. It protects both of you and it demonstrates a level of professional maturity that most people your boss manages will never show. I want to close with something worth sitting with. Managing up is not a tactic. It's not something you deploy for a few weeks before your performance review and then set aside. It's a sustained discipline that builds compounding trust over time. The professionals who do this well don't necessarily rise the fastest, but they consistently end up in rooms that they wouldn't otherwise be in. They get considered for opportunities before those opportunities are posted. They build advocates in leadership who go to bat for them when the timing matters. They also tend to be genuinely better at their jobs because they understand the organization at a level that most of their peers simply do not. They know what the real priorities are. They know what the actual constraints are. And they know how decisions are actually made, not just how the org chart says they're made. That knowledge doesn't come from a course. It comes from building relationships and paying attention over time. The people that you've watched get ahead over the years, the ones you've maybe written off as lucky or political, a significant number of them were doing exactly this. Not all of them, but likely more than you think. Managing up is not a shortcut. It's not a hack. It's a discipline that most people are too uncomfortable, too proud, or simply too unaware to build. The fact that you've spent some of your day with me thinking about this puts you in a different category already. Now, go do something with it. That's a wrap on today's episode of Toby Talks. If this episode gave you something useful, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. That's the best compliment that you can give me, and it genuinely helps more people find this content. You can find everything at toby-talks.com. More episodes, the blog, and resources for professionals who are serious about getting better. I'm Toby Hoy. Thanks for spending some time here, and I'll see you in the next one.